The defendant did not mention the devil or act like he was suffering from a delusion during the first several minutes of his statement to the police on September 4th of 2016 when he was lying to them, did he?
No.
When the defendant, when asked by his mom and stepdad why he did it, in a telephone call that was recorded on September 4th of 2016, he didn't say the devil made him do it or that he was hearing voices and the voices told him to kill Lauren, did he?
He did not within the first minutes, no.
He never did during that initial call, did he?
Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about the call now. No.
And to your knowledge, did the defendant's parents ever indicate to you or anyone that the defendant mentioned the devil or satanic research that he had completed around them, or that he talked about it around them at all?
His parents didn't have any knowledge of that, no.
And just because I research Christianity or the Bible, it doesn't make me Jesus Christ or God, does it?
No.
Nor does it excuse my behavior if I do kill in the name of God, does it?
No.
The defendant told you that he spent a lot of time researching the occult, Satanism, or the devil, didn't he?
I don't have a quantity. I don't know what you mean by a lot.
Okay. Or did he tell you he spent hours, or did the material that you have provided indicate that he'd spent several hours researching the occult?
It appeared that it would have been at least several hours.
Okay. And some of the things that he says make sense. For example, red and blue combined make the color purple, correct?
Did say that, and that makes sense.
Okay. And then if you put the number 6 plus 9 together and overlay them, they make the number 8, don't they?
Yes, 6 and 9 superimposed to make 8.
And then, did he tell you, or the evidence you were provided, that the third eye he talks about represents drugs?
I'm sorry, did the third eye that he talked about represent drugs to him?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that what you're saying?
And I know it's a lot to remember.
Yes, he did. There were times when he spoke about third eye representing drugs, or being related to drugs. Opening his third eye, I believe, and talking about his pineal gland, which is a gland in the brain.
And then, on direct, you mentioned his drug usage, but you didn't talk about how it related to your opinion regarding insanity, did you?
We didn't get into that yet, no.
Okay. Let's talk about that. What effect, if any, did you feel the defendant's severe usage of drugs had to do with the murder of Lauren Landavazo and the aggravated assault of Michaela Smith?
Well, as I mentioned yesterday, he had a pervasive history of drug use and pervasive history of chronic mental illness, that symptoms were starting to develop of both of those around the age of 13, 14, when he was starting to use drugs. He started having some prodromal symptoms of schizoaffective disorder of a psychotic process, and that, sorry, look over here towards the chart, that the prodromal period is basically a period of time where you're starting to exhibit some symptoms, show some symptoms of social withdrawal, apathy, irritability, not being as interactive with other people, and he was starting to show some of those signs and symptoms around that time. Like I said yesterday, we can't really know in his case what came first, the chicken or the egg, in terms of substance use or in terms of the psychosis. We know that through the research on both of those that they're very closely related and associated. And so people who smoke marijuana, who start smoking marijuana earlier in life, who smoke marijuana for longer periods of time, and who use higher amounts of marijuana, with each of those the chance of them developing a psychosis or something like schizoaffective disorder increases. And so he had a chronic history of showing symptoms of schizoaffective disorder, and these symptoms were present.
Let me stop you there. So it's voluntary, he voluntarily took the drugs. Nobody forced him to take the drugs when he was 13 or 14, did they?
Correct, he voluntarily took them.
Okay, and throughout his life, no one forced him to take the drugs, did they?
Not that I know of.
And then you said that he has cannabis use disorder, which is severe,
Yes,
and then he has opioid use disorder, severe. Is that correct?
yes.
And all of that was voluntary on his part.
He voluntarily used opioids and cannabis.
And so that cannabis and the opioid use exacerbated his mental illness, the type of mental illness you diagnosed him with, correct?
It's likely that it did throughout the course of his mental health history.
And then you mentioned yesterday that the defendant didn't have any drugs for 60 days in his stint at UT Harris Hospital. Is that correct?
I don't know if it was exactly 60 days, but the dates were, I don't have a calendar available, but the dates were June 25th, 2015 to August 24th, 2015.
So approximately 60 days?
Yes.
Yet when he was released, he voluntarily went back to his illegal drug usage, did he not?
Yes, it resumed at some point after that. I'm not sure how soon afterwards. I would imagine because of the severity of his drug problems that it was pretty soon afterwards.
Okay, and when was he discharged from UT Harris?
August 5th, August 24th, 2015.
And then the offense for which we're here today was September 2nd of 2016?
Correct.
So approximately a year after he was discharged, and during that time, he voluntarily returned to his illegal drug usage,
Yes.
which was severe in your opinion.
Yes.
And were there other illicit drugs that the defendant used or told you that he had used in his lifetime?
Yes.
And what were they?
Methamphetamine, MDMA, which is more commonly known as ecstasy, gamma hydroxybutyrate, also known as GHB, don't recall others off the top of my head,
You
but
mentioned heroin?
yes, heroin, yes, he used heroin. But that falls under the category of the opioids. So he said that he'd used virtually every opioid.
Oxycontin?
Yes, Oxycontin.
Fentanyl patch? Or fentanyl?
I don't recall him mentioning fentanyl patch, but people can get their hands on those and use those, and it wouldn't, I mean, if you told me that he used it, it wouldn't surprise me because they're all kind of in the same class, those drugs.
So ecstasy, what is ecstasy?
It's a stimulant drug that can cause people to have euphoric feelings, cause some dissociative feelings, people to feel more, people use it oftentimes to feel more interconnected with other people. And,
Does it heighten sexual awareness or feelings?
It can, yes, it can intensify sexual urges or feelings.
And then methamphetamine, did he tell you how he ingested it? Did he shoot it? Did he?
He had used it, I believe he'd used it intravenously. Yeah, I think he may have also smoked it.
And then GHB, is that the date rape drug?
It's colloquially known as the date rape drug, yes.
And then heroin, did he tell you how he ingested heroin?
I believe he also used heroin at some point. I think I saw somewhere that he had used it intravenously, but I can't specifically recall.
And then Fentanyl, can you tell us what fentanyl is?
I do know that he did orally consume heroin, but I don't know if he used intravenously as well.
Can you tell us what fentanyl is?
Yeah, fentanyl is a patch. It's one of the strongest opioids. It's a synthetic opioid that it basically acts similarly to all the rest of them, except that it has a stronger affinity for the receptors in the brain that are called mu opioid receptors that produce effects. A mu, like the Greek letter mu opioid receptors, and those are the receptors that produce the intended effects of like euphoria or a good feeling. And then they also can have a sedating or calming effect on people. Make people tired. It's a downer medication.
Did he mention to you that he tried K2?
Yes, he had used synthetic cannabinoids as well, K2. Yes.
And then what about acid?
He mentioned that he had used LSD. Yes.
And he's been doing all of that his whole life, correct, for the most part?
Since he was 13 or 14.
And so you can't separate his drug usage from him, can you?
It's a big part of his life. Or had been until the periods where he was in psychiatric facilities or in jail.
And did he tell you what he consumed the day of the murder and aggravated assault on September 2nd of 2016?
Yes.
What did he tell you he consumed?
He stated that morning he had used 40 milligrams of hydrocodone, so 4 10 milligram tabs of hydrocodone.
Okay, if I were to take one pill of hydrocodone, it pretty much knocks me out. But a person that has this extensive drug history, do you build up a tolerance to it?
That's right. He described symptoms of tolerance and withdrawal to me, which means that his brain over time habituated to the effects of the drug.
So he could function on that amount of hydrocodone?
That's right. Yeah, he could walk and talk, and he was doing what he did on the day of the instant offense while he was on those drugs.
And did he mention he was high or euphoria or anything, make any statements how his state was before he went and shot those 2 little girls?
Yes, he used the word high. He used the word high to describe it.
And while he was under the influence of the 40 milligrams of hydrocodone, could you shoot a gun?
Somebody that's, like I said, that's used to it or habituated to it, yes.
Not a problem.
No problem.
Did he also smoke a large amount of marijuana beforehand too?
Well, large is, to me it was large, but to him it would have been actually a small amount. He smoked, I believe, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 grams, I think maybe 2 grams. Let me double check here.
Is that what you stated in your report?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? A lot of parentheses, could you repeat that?
Yes. But I'm just going from your...
Oh, it's my report. It's maybe if you could refer me to the page. Okay,
page
thank you.
47 and 47. Your notes.
Okay, so sorry, start over again. Okay, he said that before the police got me for drugs, I wanted to get one of them, referring to Lauren.
That's what he told you.
Yeah, so the words that he said were the ones that were not in parentheses. The words that are in parentheses are what I interpret in that. Lauren was not a police officer, so and it didn't really the statement didn't really make logical sense to me, so that's the best way that I interpreted that statement.
Okay, let me just read this for the jury, the way that you interpret it. You said, Lott told you, before the police got me for drugs, I wanted to get one of them, referring to Lauren. Is that correct?
That was my interpretation. What he said was before...
Is that correct? Is that your interpretation?
That was my interpretation.
And then did he also tell you during your most recent interview that he, Kody Lott, was hoping to get not guilty by reason of insanity?
Yes.
And those were his words.
Yes, but when I talked to him previously...
No, sir, just yes or no, okay?
Well, when I talked to him previously...
The question was, were those his words? Yes or no?
Yes.
Did he not tell you also that he was not involved in Satanism, but he just researched it?
He told me that, yes, when I met with him the second time.
And typically, when you're looking whether somebody's insane or not at the time of the offense, you look shortly before the offense, during the offense, and after the offense. Do you not?
Yes.
So let's go before the offense. The defendant formed a plan, correct?
Yes.
The defendant watched the victim for a year, Lauren, which he watched her walk home from school.
Yes.
He waited until his parents were out of town so he could get the loaded semi-automatic rifle from their apartment.
Yes, that's true.
He chose what type of semi-automatic rifle to use to commit the murder.
That's correct.
He chose the .22 rifle so that he wouldn't mutilate Lauren from using the .223, correct?
That's correct. That was part of his sacrifice.
And then he prepared, did he not?
He had some preparation, minimal preparation.
Okay, so he had to go to his parents' house and then get the key to the gun safe and then also use a screwdriver to pry it open because it was flush to get the weapon, did he not?
Well, the report that I read said that he believed that he had to use the screwdriver, but Brian Rowland actually said that the safe was broken or the key alone would work.
The defendant told the police that he used the key and a screwdriver to get it open.
That's correct, yes.
He left the parents a note for when he got caught or arrested.
Yes, he believed he was going to get caught, so he left his parents a note. I think that said something to, you asked me earlier what it said, and I think it may have said something to the effect of, that he was the one that did it.
When did you remember that?
I seem to recall him saying that somewhere.
In your notes?
I don't recall.
He placed the rifle in a bag and he threw clothes over it so people would think it was a baseball bat and that he was going to baseball practice. Is that correct?
I wasn't aware of the baseball practice part, but he did mention that I'm not that familiar with guns, but the handle of the gun would appear like a baseball bat. Or
The butt of the gun?
Butt of the gun, that was it.
Then he wrapped the weapon before he left the apartment so he could be ready to commit the murder.
You said wrapped?
Wrapped.
Wrapped?
Wrapped the weapon.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat the whole question?
Sure. Did he, prior to committing the offense, he was in his parents' apartment. After getting the weapon, the murder weapon, from the gun safe, he wrapped the weapon, getting it ready to shoot.
WRACKED?
Yes, sir.
I'm not familiar with that firearm terminology.
Have you heard of the phrase locked and loaded?
Yes.
You're ready to go?
Yes.
That's pretty much what you do.
Okay, so he had it ready to go. I think he said he had the safety on, but...
Does that not tell you that he knows right from wrong by putting the safety on? There's no accidental discharge that way. He's not going to harm himself or shoot himself. You put the safety on, that's for your safety, not for anybody else's, right?
I don't understand what that has to do with psychotic understanding of wrongfulness.
If I didn't know what I was doing, I would assume I would get the weapon and then just go outdoors and shoot everybody up.
Yes,
I wouldn't take the time to put it on safety before I get in a vehicle and drive down the street to shoot somebody.
You're speaking maybe more of the nature and quality of the act, not the wrongfulness of the act. He had psychotic beliefs that undermined his ability to understand the wrongfulness of the act.
One at a time, please.
Okay, when I ask you a question, you have to answer it. You can't keep going on. I've let you do that for a little bit. But when I ask you a question, it's yes or no. Please answer yes or no. Okay?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. She can go ahead and make an objection to the court. She doesn't need to instruct the witness.
Overruled.
And so he put the weapon on safety. Do you know why a weapon has a safety button on it?
Yes, so that, as you mentioned, so that it does not accidentally discharge
And hurt himself.
or shoot or make noise and draw attention to it. I don't know.
Okay, if he's hold on, doctor. If he's in a room in an apartment by himself and he puts the safety on, it's only so that he doesn't accidentally discharge and hurt himself, correct? There's no one else around.
It's so that it
Yes
doesn't
or no?
accidentally discharge.
Yes or no? You put a safety on so that it's safe that you don't harm anyone else, correct?
You don't want the firearm to
Yes or no?
discharge.
No, I'm going to object to requiring yes or no. He's allowed to explain his answer.
On that question.
Yeah, it's my understanding that safety, I'm not a firearms expert, but it's my understanding that safety is used so that the weapon doesn't accidentally discharge. And if a bullet goes off, it could hit someone, including yourself.
And if you're in an apartment by yourself, the only one you could hurt is yourself, correct?
That's correct, but
Okay, that's it. And then, before he murders and shoots Michaela Smith, murders Lauren Lombazzo and shoots Michaela Smith, he watched them from inside the apartment, being inside the apartment to avoid detection and looking suspicious, sitting outside with a gun, wouldn't you say?
I would say that sitting outside with a gun would be suspicious, yes.
And so, waiting inside is an indicator you know right from wrong because you don't want anybody to suspect you. To tell you that, and you may not know this because you didn't read the text, but he texted his mother that he didn't know any of the details of the shooting when she inquired.
I did not have that information, but it seems consistent with his other behavior of not telling anyone and not telling his parents. But I believe I did know about a phone call that had happened between them shortly thereafter, and he denied any involvement, like from his mother. She called him after from Reynosa, New Mexico.
And so he also checked social media and news media constantly for details of the shooting until he was caught.
He followed the story pretty closely. I don't know about constantly, but
Okay, well, you don't know what the texts say or what the extraction from the phone is, do you?
to me, constantly indicates like every moment of every day, and I wouldn't say that he was doing that, but I think he was following it pretty closely.
How can you say that if you don't have the information from his phone?
Because he had to have done things like go to the bathroom, smoke, he was still smoking, he was still using at that time, I believe, so he had to have been doing other things.
But you don't know because you haven't looked at the extraction from his phone, do you?
I have not seen the extract information from his phone.
Did you know he looked up the victim's Facebook along with her boyfriend's Facebook so he could learn their names?
From the material I reviewed, he learned their, I thought he learned their names from the news report.
But you don't know again because you don't know the internet history on his phone, correct?
I don't have any of his internet phone history.
And then, once he realized the police were looking for the wrong suspect vehicle, he came back to town when it was dark, did he not?
I don't recall, but
You're not disputing that, though.
if you're saying that's the case, then I will not dispute it.
And then, once Mr. Lott realized he wasn't going to get caught, he destroyed the note he wrote when he thought that he was going to be caught or arrested.
That's correct.
And then, when he hadn't been caught and he knew they had a different suspect vehicle, he went back not once but twice to retrieve the murder weapon that he'd thrown in a vacant field.
That's correct.
And then Mr. Lott, the defendant, goes back to his parents' house and puts the murder weapon back so they didn't know it was missing when they returned home.
That's correct. He didn't bother to wipe off the dirt or the grass that was on it, but he did replace it.
And then also before he got out of his vehicle when he was returning the murder weapon, he wrapped it in a blanket so as to conceal it, correct?
Yes.
And then he also, and I don't know if you know this, but there's testimony that he stuck it under his arm and walked with it by his side, looking around to see if anybody noticed him as he walked to apartment 179.
It seems vaguely familiar. It wouldn't surprise me consistent with those other behaviors.
And that would show you know right from wrong because you're concealing it and looking around to make sure people don't see you when you're returning the murder weapon, correct?
Concealing a weapon is an indicator, one of many that we talk about indicators that indicates non-involvement.
Another indicator is it not after leaving the apartment and the defendant's pulled over by an officer, he's clutching the steering wheel so hard as the whites of his knuckles are showing.
I recall that being mentioned.
And also, during the traffic stop, he was able to coherently answer all the officers' questions about where he'd been and why he'd been at his parents' house because they were in Ruidoso. Or you don't know because you hadn't seen that stop, right?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
During the stop, he was able to coherently answer all the officers' questions about where he had just been and why.
I did read that in the Wichita Falls Police Department report.
And the jury will be able to see this soon, but when you think a detective is giving you a detail of a crime, he's able to incorporate it into a lie, does he not? Such as the .22 spent shell casing that was found in his vehicle.
But yes, he lied about several things, especially during the early portion of the interview.
The fact that he knows enough about the facts of the case that he tried to incriminate not one, but two innocent individuals in a statement to law enforcement.
He kind of implicated Marlon Rader. I'm not sure who the second individual
His
was.
stepbrother, Jordan Rowland, who also had access to his stepfather's vehicle and was there to get a weapon. You remember that?
Yeah, I didn't know that that's where he was going with that, but if that was the way he interpreted it, then I think that's fine to interpret it that way. He certainly was trying to take the attention off.
The jury's going to get to hear it and they can make whatever decisions they want. The fact that he uses the term caught in murder, that indicates that you know the wrongfulness of your actions, doesn't it? Yes or no?
Saying the word caught in murder would indicate that a person understands the wrongfulness of what they did.
The fact that he brings up the reward money and the amounts to officers also indicates that he's looking at the stories, doesn't it? In the news.
He was aware of the reward amounts. In his opinion, it should have been higher. And he was pretty aware of the stories of the news.
And he was also aware that the first 48 hours in a murder is crucial to solving the murder case, correct?
They mentioned a TV show that I haven't seen called 48 Hours. I believe that's what it's called. And he mentioned that he didn't think he was going to be caught within the first 48 hours, so that he didn't think that he might be caught at all. But I don't know about the exact statement that he made.
And it's in his statement. And then does he not tell officers that he was going to keep the murder a secret?
I'm sorry, could you repeat one more time?
He told the officers, did he not, that he was going to keep the murder a secret if he hadn't been caught?
He did. He said, as I said yesterday, he was going to keep it in his skeleton closet and not mention it to anyone.
Did you know that the defendant told Dr. Randall Price that he did not hear voices on the day that he murdered 13-year-old Lauren Landavazo and shot Michaela Smith?
That's correct. He reported to him that he heard voices the day before, but not on the day of the offense.
And you know a person is presumed sane. You testified to that.
That's correct. Legally presumed sane.
You know the defendant has the burden of proof to prove the defendant was insane at the time of the offense.
That's correct.
In your professional medical opinion, there are more reasons indicating the defendant knew that his actions were wrong on September 2nd of 2016 when he committed the murder and aggravated assault of 2 junior high school girls who were simply walking home from school than otherwise.
Quantitatively, that's correct.
After hearing more evidence and reviewing Dr. Price's report, would you consider changing your opinion as to the defendant's sanity?
No.
Absolutely.
Doctor, we talked a lot about the aspects of knowing the wrongfulness of his actions. Let's turn and talk about the actions where he does not know that his conduct is wrong. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you determined were actions or conduct that indicated that Kody Lott did not know the wrongfulness of his actions in shooting these girls?
Yes. Give me just one moment.
And there's a list, so what's the first thing in your notes that indicate that?
Well, I didn't really organize them by importance, but I would like to talk about each of them because I think they're all important to consider. So in addition to everything that we just talked about and everything that we just heard that would show a rational motivation for killing Law Vazo, Mr. Lott also had other beliefs that conflicted with those ideas, and it's my opinion that those canceled out his understanding of the wrongfulness of what he was doing, and so I'm going to talk about those. He called the murder a fulfillment of a prophecy of God, and he said that he was sacrificing himself, his life and his freedom for Ms. Law Vazo to go to heaven. And he said that during the actual confession to the officers. He also told the officers that he was sacrificing himself for her benefit, and he mentioned the musical band Bullet for My Valentine, which in his mind was somehow loosely connected to a sacrifice that he was making. He said that he believed that Ms. Law& Vazo was, quote, an innocent girl who was going to end up having something bad happen to her anyway, and he thought that one of those things that might happen was that she was going to get raped in a couple of years, and he said that he was saving her from evil of the world by sacrificing her and sending her to heaven. He said that when he found out from the news report that her favorite color was the color purple, and that purple was a color that they were associating with her death, that he knew that it was meant to be because of the thing that the district attorney was mentioning a second ago about the 6 and the 9 representing the colors red and blue, and when you put those together, those make purple.
Let me stop you for just a second. Okay, these are strange statements. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how do you evaluate those qualitatively in the wrongfulness? How does that fit in?
So these are, as you mentioned, these are very unusual beliefs, and they, when you look at a person's understanding of the wrongfulness of their conduct, if they have beliefs that are delusional and are psychotic and are due to, in this case, schizoaffective disorder, that show that they don't understand the wrongfulness of what they were doing, then they didn't understand the wrongfulness of what they were doing, no matter what all the other information says. And so he had these beliefs, and I've only talked about a few of them, but he had these beliefs that undermine or cancel out his understanding of wrongfulness, because if he didn't think that she could die, if he believed that she was immortal, as I'll tell you in a minute, that doesn't show that he understood that he was killing her. And he makes statements to the effect that he was killing her, and he makes statements to the effect that he was murdering her, but at the same time, he was believing that she was immortal and that she wouldn't be killed, or perhaps that she would be sent to another dimension, or perhaps that she would be sent to heaven. But they were all these different beliefs that he was having at once. And if you feel confused by that, that's because it is confusing. He was very confused at the time that he did this.
Okay, let's go to number 3.
Okay. He said that this was a test to see if Jesus would save an innocent person. He expressed a belief that Jesus might have saved her from being killed. He said that he expected to be caught immediately, and that was indicated, as we mentioned, by the note. And he only ran off, quote unquote, ran off only because he was surprised that he had not been caught. And he expressed a belief, as we mentioned, I think yesterday, that the devil was protecting him from getting caught. He said that he killed in this land of Ozo because God did not come down and rapture everybody, and he mentioned in association with that he believed that killing her would be a sacrifice to get God involved and to get God to come and help these other children that were being abused by a satanic cult or gang that was going on around the world. He said that God had sent Lauren to earth as an angel and that she was different from other people because she could not die. He then asked me, why wouldn't she get into heaven? And he said she could, quote, could not truly die. He saw her as an angel of God. He said that she was an angel who was mixed in among the humans, which he believed was not uncommon. He said that there had been other people that appeared to be humans that weren't, that were actually angels. And then he said that she's not dead, she's still alive, and everyone else thinks that she's dead. And he mentioned the rapper Tupac, who is dead, but is believed by some people to not be dead.
Let me stop you a second. You reviewed the jail calls between him and his parents, is that correct?
Between him and his mother, and then there was one call, I think, that had Brian Rowland on it.
Was there any discussion as to whether or not Lauren was dead in those phone calls?
There was one phone call where his mother said he was confused about why he was in jail, and she said, well, you're in jail because of murder. And he said, murder? He acted surprised by that, and she said, yeah, and then he said something to the effect of, why am I in here for murder? I didn't murder anybody. And she said, you killed that little girl. And he said, I killed her? And she said, yeah, you killed her. And at that point, he kind of seemed to accept it. When his mom challenged his delusional beliefs, a lot of times he'd be able to go, from those phone calls, he'd be able to see it a little bit more from her perspective, because I think he trusted his mother, and he was able to see, I think, at that point, okay, yeah, I'm in here for murder and for killing her.
Would that correspond with this statement that you just talked about?
Yeah, in general, in general, he has so many conflicting and confusing ideas. He's so confused in his mind that there will be times when he does say, I killed her, I murdered her, I shot her. And then there will be other times when he's more confused about that. He believes that she's still alive. He talked a lot during my evaluation with him about how either she definitely was, he expressed beliefs where she definitely was alive. At other times he said she may be alive, maybe she's dead. And then at other times he definitively said that she is dead and that he killed her. But
what about number 7?
Sure. So he mentioned a verse in the Bible where Jesus said about a girl that she's just sleeping, she's not dead, and he conveyed that verse to express a belief that Lauren was still alive. He said that she was still alive, but she was just somewhere else. He said it was better for Lauren to go somewhere else because he believed that she was being bullied at school. I didn't encounter any evidence anywhere to suggest that was a real occurrence, but he believed that. He also believed that she had smoked marijuana and that she was going to be punished in some way for that, and that part of her punishment was to hold up a sign with Bible verses by the side of the road with a man that holds up Bible verses. Again, there's no evidence to suggest that was actually the case, but he believed that. He said that she could not take her own life because it's not allowed for her to do so, and he thought that maybe she would because of the bullying. But obviously, I put bullying in quotation marks because there was no evidence of any bullying, but he believed in his mind that she was being bullied and that she couldn't commit suicide because that was prohibited by religious beliefs. But he said that he was shooting her basically to kill her to avoid that. That was one of the reasons. And he said, I watched myself shoot her, but she did not die. And then he said he wanted the shooting event to end as quickly as possible, as we mentioned with the district attorney, because she was in pain. She was letting out those screams. He said that God had sent Lauren to earth as an angel and that she was different from other people and could not be, he said that several times throughout. And then he also mentioned that he had to sacrifice her, as I said before, to stop other children from getting sacrificed by this cult or gang that he believed was going on around the world. And he felt that if he did this, he would get God's attention and he would be able to get God to intervene and perhaps come down to earth or send Jesus Christ back down to earth. He said that this was an act to just try to get God involved. He said that when he shot her, she got eternal life with Jesus Christ. He said he didn't know if she was reincarnated, but when you go to heaven, when you die, you either go to heaven or hell. And he said that she went to heaven. He said that the murder just had to happen because of her age. He believed after he found out that there was significance in the fact that she was 13. He had something about the number 13 that was significant to him. He wasn't very clear on that, but I think it had something to do with his occultic beliefs. He stated that he was hoping that he sent Ms. Lonavazo to the real heaven rather than the Order of the Eastern Star. And before he told me that the Order of the Eastern Star was the Helen Therapy and mental health and mental retardation services. So I don't really know what he meant by that, but he was saying that he hoped that he had sent her to heaven. And he said that someone tried to tell him that he was Jesus, and they took him out of jail to resurrect Lauren. And he mentioned that he went back when he was in jail, that he believed that he went back to the site where he shot the girls, and that he said that he believed that she was actually buried there, and that he had gone there, and that she'd been brought back out of a grave there, and that he had spoken with her. That's what he had believed. And he said that he had spoken with her after she died, but no one else had, and not even her family could see her. Let's see. And then after telling me all that, he told me that with kind of a conviction. He believed it, but then after that he said, well, it might have been a false vision or an illusion because I was dealing with demons and stuff.
And then number 13 on your notes.
Oh yeah, so I mentioned that a little bit, but I'll say it again. He said that he killed her to, quote, help her out from being punished on earth because he believed, again, that she had smoked marijuana. Again, there's no evidence that that had really happened in her life or that he had any knowledge of that, but he believed that. And he believed that he was sending her to, quote, the real heaven. He said that he sent her to dimensions that other people cannot see. And he said that he sacrificed himself, again, for Lauren's benefit. I think I mentioned that before. But he said various things throughout at various times, so that's kind of repeating some of these. And he also mentioned that he believed, he wondered whether it was actually Lauren that he shot and killed or whether it was some other being or some other spirit or some other form in Lauren's body or in her being. So those are all of the different things that he told me that he was thinking at the time of the incidents.
And you went through a lot of questions and answers with regard to him avoiding detection and lying to the police and stuff. How do all of those things square with what we've just heard here? I mean, when you as a psychiatrist hear all of this, how do you balance it out?
Yeah, as I mentioned yesterday, people with psychotic beliefs and delusional beliefs can still act rationally and appear to act rationally. And so he was doing things that would help him avoid getting caught, and that would help him avoid detection, and that would help him from being placed at the scene of the crime, such as lying about his whereabouts, from having the murder weapon being found, and things like that. He did all these things, but that doesn't speak to his knowledge of the wrongfulness, because he had these beliefs, as I just said, that he was sending her to other dimensions, that she was an angel, that she was immortal, that she couldn't actually be killed, that he was sacrificing her to achieve a greater good for the rest of these children in the world that were being abused and tortured and killed. And so when you look at it, those were his motivations. Those were his psychotic motivations. He did have other motivations. He did mention, as we talked about yesterday, the jealousy and being fired up or charged up, as she mentioned, by her friends and things like that. So he did have some other apparent motivations, and he did mention those, and those were actually some of the first things that he mentioned to me, even to me, when I talked to him. And it wasn't until kind of letting him ramble on and on further that he got all this other information out. And that's actually what my evaluation with him was mostly me listening to him ramble on and on for hours, sometimes with some redirection of him saying a lot, expressing a lot of his delusional beliefs, and a lot of it was about stuff that wasn't even related to the case or pertaining to the case. But when we talk about the case, again, he expressed beliefs that she couldn't die and that she was an angel, that if she did die, he was sending her to heaven, and it was a sacrifice for her benefit and also for the benefit of children that were being tortured worldwide. And that, to me, indicates that he didn't understand wrongfulness as a result of his psychotic delusions and as a result of his schizoaffective disorder, because if he thinks that he's shooting someone that's not even a real being, or if he believes that he's shooting an angel, or if he believes that she's immortal, that doesn't show an understanding of the wrongfulness. And even if he did believe that he was killing her, and he believed that it was a sacrifice, he believed that he was doing it for a greater good, and that it wasn't wrong in his mind because he was saving these other children from being tortured and abused and killed all over the world by this cult or gang, as he called it.
Okay, let me ask you about this drug usage. How does the drug usage, we heard a long litany of drugs that he's taken and used, how does that relate to this case? How does that relate to the insanity?
Well, Mr. Lott had been using opioids fairly heavily, 80 to 90 milligrams a day of hydrocodone for the months leading up to the instant offense, and he'd also been smoking marijuana up to 14 grams or half an ounce a day of marijuana. But we don't know the quality or potency of that, but that's a pretty high amount to use. And so, as we mentioned before, with cross-examination with the district attorney, people can become habituated to the effects of these drugs, and as she mentioned, he was still cognizant and aware enough to be able to grab the gun to do all these things. But the point is, his brain, and this doesn't just happen to him, this happens in a lot of people who use opioids or marijuana on a daily basis, but their brain will recalibrate and reestablish a new baseline based on the amount of drugs that they're using. So if a person uses marijuana or opioid drugs for a long period of time, months or years, their brain gets used to that level, and that becomes their new level of normalcy in terms of what their brain is used to. And so he had a pattern of using every day, and he was using essentially at that point to avoid withdrawal symptoms. And so when a person stops using opioids, for example, they have physical and psychological problems that can be related to stopping using opioids. People can get flu-like symptoms, they can get runny nose, they can feel really bad all over, they can get chills or hot sweats. And so he was using every day before those effects ever happened, because those effects happen usually 24 to 48 hours after stopping using these drugs. So he was using every day, keeping himself from going into withdrawal, and that's what people usually do when they've developed what we call tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance is that you have to use more and more of the drug over time to achieve the same effect, or if you're using the same amount, it doesn't have any more intoxicating effect on you, really. So he was using 80 to 90 milligrams of hydrocodone a day, and it wasn't having any more real effect on him, so he was essentially using to be normal, and I use the term normal in a very broad sense, but for him that was his level of normalcy. He was using 80 to 90 milligrams a day, and his brain had reestablished a new level of normal. As the district attorney mentioned, if people who don't use drugs use that level of drugs, we would be very impaired, very intoxicated, having lots of problems related to those drugs. For him, that was his normal state of being. He had been using those drugs for a long time at those levels. And the same thing, I've been talking about the opiates, but the same thing goes for the cannabis. He was using high levels of cannabis.
So, Doctor, let me stop here for a
Sure.
second. So, the levels of usage of the drugs at that time was consistent with what it had been before that point in time, for a long period of time. Is that right?
It was pretty stable, with the exception of the marijuana. Looked like it was a little bit less on the day of the murder. He went from using it looked like about 14 grams to, I think, like I said, 2 grams that day.
With the planning and shooting of these girls have happened without any drugs being used on them.
It's my opinion that it would have, because of the enduring, persistent nature of his schizoaffective disorder. He has had a disorder and has had symptoms of disorder, as I mentioned, since probably age 13 or 14. He had these prodromal symptoms. He had some very pronounced symptoms to where he actually met the formal criteria for the diagnosis when he was in UT Harris County Psychiatric Center, which was, as the district attorney mentioned, about a year before he did this. So a year before he did this, when he was completely off of drugs, he had symptoms of schizoaffective disorder where he was having the same types of symptoms the day that he killed Ms. Landabaza. He had delusions. He had hallucinations around that time. I know that we said that on the day of, he didn't report any hallucinations, but he had hallucinations the day before. And he had some disordered thought and illogical thoughts that were conflicting with one another. As I mentioned before, he had lots of different thoughts about why he was doing this, and many of them, as I mentioned, were what we would call insane delusions, meaning they prevented him from understanding the wrongfulness of what he was doing. For example, he believed that she was an angel, that she couldn't die, and that he was sacrificing her to help her and to help children that were being sacrificed around the world.
Okay.
Doctor, we'll never know what would have happened had he not been on the drugs that day that he committed the murder and the aggravated assault, because he told you he was high, he felt good, he was pissed off about where his life was going. Did he not?
He used the term high, but as I mentioned to the jury just now.
Hold on. Let me direct your attention to, in your notes, page 3 of 47. It says he was high, felt good, was pissed off about what was going on in his life, which is what I just said to you.
That's what he said, yes.
Thank you. Did he also tell you he might as well kill someone, and he had then asked himself, who's going to be worth it? If I have to spend the rest of my life in prison, who is it going to be for?
Yes, he believed he would get the rest of his life in prison, and he also mentioned to me that he knew about he said the lethal injection, so indicating that he knew about the death penalty as well.
And did he say, I'm already getting punished as if I've murdered someone, so I might as well murder someone?
Yes.
Where did he get money for all those drugs?
From his parents.
Because he wasn't employed,
That's correct.
not ever held on a real job.
He had worked at, I believe, Sonic and Chipotle for very brief periods of time. But because of his drug use and mental illness, he had not.
He had another excuse, doctor, he had another excuse. What people do, that is their behavior, is more important than what they say, which is self-reporting in a forensic evaluation, is it not? Yes or no?
I put more weight on their behavior than on their words.
That's what it is.
What does behavior include?
Behavior would include, actions, behavior, things that people do.
Well, behavior that when you're talking to them, you're observing behavior?
I observe behavior while I'm speaking with them, but as I mentioned during my evaluation, he didn't really exhibit much behavior other than stroking his beard every once in a while. My evaluation, the observation of his behavior during my evaluation wasn't a critical consideration, and that's why yesterday when they were asking about his appearance too, that didn't really, to me, matter much.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Gentlemen, we'll take our morning recess at this time. Usually with Mr. Costley, they'll discuss the case, will perform with special